Good afternoon. Thank you for joining our webinar. We are just waiting on a few more people to join, and then we'll kick off. There's still 3 minutes to go anyway, so hope you've got a nice hot cup of coffee or hot cup of tea, and ready to find out more about human firewalls. Hello again, everybody. Just waiting for a few more people to join, and we'll kind of kick off within the next minute. Right, let's get started. So just a warm welcome to everybody, and thank you very much for joining this webinar, which is all around security awareness, building a human firewall, the concept of that, and how to transform the risk of cyber that's out there, plaguing all of us on a daily basis into a shield. My name is Carl Henriksen. I work with Oryx Align, which are a security-focused technology service provider. Cybersecurity is something which is very, very close to our hearts, and we try very, very hard at successfully protecting our clients wherever possible at the risk of cyber. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Javad. Javad, if I can maybe hand over to you for an intro.
Yeah, thank you, Carl, and thank you everyone for joining us here on this webinar. To quote Jay-Z, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to spend this time with us, and for that, we really do appreciate it. I work at KnowBe4. KnowBe4 is one of the world's largest security awareness and training providers. And what we focus on within the realm of cybersecurity is the human element. We all know about having a good layered approach, and there are lots of great technologies out there, but the human element is the one we focus on. That's the layer we believe is often the most neglected, and it can be quite tricky. So hopefully through this webinar, we can showcase how it doesn't need to be tricky and complicated, and how we can build a better human.
Great, thanks, Javad. And just some housekeeping rules. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please post it into the chat box, and then we have a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar to answer those questions. So please, if anything kind of crops to mind while we're kind of presenting, feel free to kind of post those questions. Right, so I thought I'd kind of kick off with the role of human error and how prevalent it is within cybersecurity. And I think it's fair to say that all humans, unfortunately, make mistakes. Market research out there consistently points to a staggering high percentage of data breaches as a result of human error. Individuals, businesses alike, have all suffered huge losses due to cyber incidents. And this includes everything from a data breach to a ransomware attack to system disruption. But a surprisingly large number of these incidents could have been avoided had it not have been for human error. We can all take the precautions and preventative measures, and we can really, go to the full extent to minimize the risk of cybercrime that would potentially impact ourselves and our businesses. But despite all the best efforts, at the end of the day, unfortunately, it only takes a single human error to put everything in jeopardy. Whether that's somebody clicking on a link, or downloading some unauthorized software, or a missed update or misconfiguration, everyday mistakes can lead to severe problems for an organization. So based on a recent finding of an IBM commissioned report, which is called the Cost of Data Breach 2020, there was actually a slight decline in the average cost of a data breach. So it reduced in 2019 from 3.92 million to 3.86 million, as in the year 2020. And the price tag was a lot less for mature organizations and industries, but unfortunately far higher for companies that had quite basic security automation and incident response processes in place. Interestingly, the human interest factor is also really being exploited quite heavily nowadays. And many of those attacks involve social engineering techniques which lure individuals and target users into ultimately making mistakes. Phishing, we would have all heard about phishing, and phishing nowadays is becoming quite advanced and very much more targeted at higher C-level individuals, as well as your typical user base. So spear phishing campaigns that contain loaded emails containing malware and attachments, which are downloaded onto a user's endpoint device, is becoming a real issue. And then the last point on that slide, many of you would have heard about the fact that in order for an organization to be successful, there must be a focus on people, process, and technology in equal order. That's not new. Technology provides the automated safeguards and the processes to determine a whole series of actions which need to be taken to achieve a particular outcome. But even the organizations with the strongest security practices in place are still vulnerable to human error. And this is because there is not enough attention being paid to the people part of the equation. So to stem human errors and to raise awareness of the potential caused by carelessness, technology and processes should really be combined with people, and specifically around employee awareness training. Moving on to the next slide, which I found very interesting. So this is an illustration of the action varieties in breaches over the last kind of 5 years, so 2015 through to 2020. And you can see on the left-hand side that it flows from kind of left to right, and you can see that phishing has been consistently high over the period. But notice how the other human errors in terms of misdelivery and misconfiguration have become a lot more prevalent over the years. And when I say misdelivery, that essentially means sending sensitive data to the wrong recipient. And it's quite alarming to think that some of the most commonly recorded forms of human error, which is on the rise, as you'll see, are unfortunately at times caused by the most trusted and the most highly skilled employees, such as system administrators or network administrators. So those errors such as system misconfigurations, poor patch management, lack of patch management, and the use of default usernames and passwords are also quite prevalent in human error nowadays, which is causing substantial damage within organizations. So I really do like that illustration. I think it kind of says a lot in terms of the landscape of cyber and kind of what is going on. Moving on to some of the most common human errors in cyber. Now, these will be pretty simple for you guys, for you able to understand and be able to kind of be aware of, but I'll touch on them all individually very quickly. Passwords. So this is a constant battle that we are seeing with users, and the reluctance to change passwords regularly, not to use recycled passwords, and to deliver some more password complexity. So in a recent study by Google, they found that a staggering 45% of people who they surveyed said they would change they would not change their password after being notified of a data breach, which I found quite staggering. I mean, why would you not change your password if you know there was a data breach? So speaking about passwords as well, something we're seeing is a shift away from the traditional 6 to 8 random characters password, which was considered, a few years ago, and maybe still is today, considered to be secured. But due to the advances of technology, hackers and software can breach any 6 random character password in a matter of minutes, which is really scary stuff. We are seeing a move to a more 3 common word passphrase approach, which is considered to be kind of secured for, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of years. So we're seeing more and more of that come to light, where users would just typically choose 3 random words and use them as a passphrase. The second item on there is really around the very poor handling of sensitive data. And when you look at it, employees work with a massive amount of data every single day, and they are unfortunately likely to make mistakes, which do lead to data leaks. So, some of the big reasons for this, things like negligence, tiredness, lack of knowledge about cyber threats, and then ultimately not really understanding the true value of the data that they're actually handling. This is becoming a big problem. The third item on that, I mentioned before, misconfiguration of systems. I think the key one that sometimes we come across a hell of a lot is not backing up critical data. If you're not backing up your data, you will be vulnerable to data loss and potentially also data breach. Some of the other aspects in there are around poor patch management, or even just a lack of patching in its entirety. And this obviously is where there are major gains to be had from partnering with a service provider who has invested in enterprise level platforms to help automate routine and essential network administration tasks. Outdated software applications, I think it's fair to say that outdated software is probably a hacker's best friend. It has known vulnerabilities and can quite easily be exploited. And unfortunately, often employees do aid cyber criminals by comprising data when they ignore such things as software updates, which are routine and they are a part of working in technology, disabling security features, or even downloading unauthorized software. And then the last part in that slide is really around a lack of knowledge. As all good employees should be, they are fully concentrated on their workloads. And unfortunately, some of them don't really show too much care when it comes to following security procedures and processes. But collectively, if your employees are lacking overall cybersecurity knowledge, it does pose a serious, serious threat to the safety of your critical systems and your data. I thought I'd share with you this comic animation, which has been circling around the internet for a good 6 or 7 years, which probably highlights the extent and the age of the problem. But in one corner, you've got all the technology and all the security in the world, and in the other corner, you've got our mate Dave, which signifies human error, and you can probably take a guess as to who wins in that scenario. So on that point, I'd like to hand over to Javad, who can take us through a bit of a deep dive on phishing.
Yeah, well, thanks for scaring me, Cole. No matter how many times I go through these things, I always end up a bit worried about my own security practices and making sure that everything's up to date. So not on this call, but after this webinar, if you're listening to this, go check if everything's up to date and your passwords are unique. So phishing, as Cole kindly mentioned, is one of the most prevalent ways that criminals are getting in, and we saw that in the chart that was showed earlier. And in your organizations, you're probably aware of phishing that happens. You might have received them in your inbox yourself. You might have known someone in your organization that's actually clicked on one of those links and either given away some information or their password, or been responsible for installing some sort of malware or ransomware on your thing. So we're all aware that phishing occurs. I think the main question that comes up is like, well, how do I compare with other organizations that look like me, or in my industry, or what have you? Because that's the only way we're actually going to get any sense of what this means. I mean, I could throw at you, hey, we're receiving 3,000 phishing emails a month, but is that good? Is that bad? Is that, what does it look like? So what we at KnowBe4 undertook a benchmark study where we analyzed a data set of over 4 million users across 17,000 organizations. And this comprised of about 9.5 million simulated phishing emails in 19 different countries. And what that consisted of was 3 phases. So the first phase was you don't have any training provided to your users, and you send a simulated phishing attack. So what is the PPP, or the phish prone percentage, i.e. for, what percentage of your employees will click on that link? So you might have a guess yourself. If today someone sent a phishing email to all of your staff, what percentage of them would actually click on it or fall victim to it? The second phase is after 90 days. So we provide them 90 days of security awareness training, and then we repeat the test and see how many people fall for it. And then phase 3 is exactly the same, but it's after a year of ongoing training, and you repeat the test and see what the results are. So on the initial test, these are the top 3 industries that are vulnerable by company size. So if you look at the small industries, if you're in healthcare and pharmaceutical, around 44.7, nearly half of your employees, for all intents and purposes, are going to click on that phishing email, which is absolutely terrifying when, especially over the last year or so since we've been in the pandemic, and there's been all these, pharmaceutical companies trying to work on a vaccine and what have you. And I'm like, eek, please don't click on those links. Please don't, bring down the organization. We need that vaccine. Education and manufacturing, and these are the top 3. You see that they're all over 40%. Actually, if you move into the large organizations, on the right-hand side, you can see technology organizations are a whopping like 55.9% of their employees will click on it. And I'm like, I saw this and I thought, why is that so? Because you'd imagine technology companies to be, understand technology and understand some of these risks. But anecdotally speaking to a few of these types of companies, they say, well, the problem is that these people are working with technology day in, day out. They have computers, and they have, they get emails all the time. And a lot of times people are just dropping each other short messages and what have you, and that's a de facto way of communication. So, it's a larger sort of like pool to target. So that's an interesting one. So, if your industry isn't in one of those, then you're off to a good start. If not, then it's not something really to be worried about, as we'll expand on. So phase one, this is where people aren't trained at all, and they're given a phishing email to all of their employees. And the average across all industries of all sizes was 37.9%, which is not great. I mean, that's over a third of your employees are likely to click on a suspicious link in an email. And there are some key figures here. These slides will be available afterwards, so I do encourage you to go through these in more detail. So on the chart on the right, you can see what it's done is you've got the industries broken out, and then you've got the size of industry there as well. So it's quite interesting. I mean, the general conclusion, what this chart is really saying is, regardless of any size or vertical, if your employees are not given any training or they're not made aware, then they're going to be susceptible to phishing or other social engineering or misconfigurations or things like that. So that's something we definitely want to avoid. So phase two, then, we repeated this same test after 90 days. And this is a point where I say, can anyone guess what the average phish-prone percentage would look like after 90 days of security awareness and training? And yep, it drops down to 14.1%. That's a significant drop. And this is only 90 days of training. So you can see results very, very quickly because people don't know what they're looking for unless you tell them what to look for. And there was a case last year in the US where there was a cashier working at one of those convenience stores. And she was near the end of her shift, and her colleague comes in and says, "Hey, I'm here to relieve you of your shift." And he was wearing the uniform of the chain, and he seemed to know what he was doing. So she said, "Thank you. It's nearly shift time up." So she handed over to him, and he started serving customers. He served a few customers, and then he shut the shutters. He emptied out the till, took cigarettes and booze, and ran off. He wasn't an employee. He just wore the uniform for employee. The thing is that unless the person who was working the shift before was made aware that this is an actual threat, if you don't recognize your colleague who's relieving you of your shift, call up so-and-so to get verification or what have you, you're not going to look out for it. So this is why telling people to look out for things is so important. Anyway, if you repeat this after a year, it drops down to 4.7%. So if you imagine, like, from nearly 37% down to below 5%, it's a massive drop. So it's irrefutable sort of evidence that the system does work. If you do make your user aware. I mean, we saw that cartoon about Dave, and the kind of perception we sometimes get is it's just futile. Like, we're always going to have a Dave who's going to click on it. But yes, nothing's ever going to be zero in security. What single control is ever going to bring you down to zero. But we can reduce the risk a ton. Carl, take us through the human firewall.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Javed. And just a note around there, what Javed was saying is that, accountability before awareness is a crazy concept. People ideally want to do the right thing. So if you show them and take them through an awareness program and educate them, and then hold them accountable for decisions they make after gaining the knowledge, is probably the correct approach kind of going forward. But yeah, Javed, thanks for sharing those stats. So onto the concept really of the human firewall. And just to give you a definition. So it's a fairly straightforward definition, which is essentially a commitment from a group of employees to follow best practices to prevent as well as report on any data breaches or suspicious activities. Obviously, the more employees you have committed to being part of the firewall, the stronger it gets. And the importance of this added human layer of protection lies in the fact that many breaches are due to error or to human error, as we have discussed before. Some of the key elements which I want to take you through, a very high level summary in terms of what I think the key elements of a human firewall are. So firstly, it needs to be easy. And we all know security is probably not easy. It is important to have detailed security policies and processes that cover everything from password complexity, password hygiene, mobile devices, etc., etc. But instead of overwhelming your team or your human firewall team with all of that, have them focus on strengthening a few weaknesses at a time and kind of work from there. Ongoing and continuous education, absolutely key. A lot of companies who we come across initially only tend to raise some form of awareness, maybe once or twice a year, but that's clearly just not enough. So human firewall education does need to be continuous because the threats are ever evolving and the threats are continuous. In terms of recognition and initiatives, everybody loves incentives. Encouraging participation into the human firewall, it can be as simple as giving each of the members special recognition for, catching phishing emails or writing phishing emails, and often, recognition or a shout out at a monthly floor plate meeting goes quite a long way in recognizing the achievements of the individuals. When it comes to vigilance, absolutely key. This is really an ongoing war against cybercrime. So you must make sure all defenses are on high alert at all times, and using phishing simulation programs, which we'll deep dive in a second, are absolutely kind of key going forward. And then, it needs to keep on evolving. Technology does not stand still. The human firewall team must be aware of the new threats, reporting any suspicious activity that happens. And as the cyber criminals' tactics change, so must the team adjust to the new best practices for their system. So all in all, really, the human firewall is a very important layer in the defense against cyber attacks. And I think working together, they can really help identify threats as well as prevent the breaches and mitigate damage. So it's a bit of a no-brainer if you ask me. And if you are able to extend the human firewall across the entire organization, which should really be the goal, you'll start to develop what's called a security culture, which is a very interesting concept, which I'd like to kind of just take you guys through, if I may. So building a security culture, by now everyone knows the criticality of security and how absolutely crucial it is that it must be embedded into everything that an organization does. But it's not easy. An organization's security culture does require constant care, feeding, and nurturing, and it's not something that grows in a positive way organically. You must invest, and obviously investment does take time. But if you are able to create a sustainable security culture, you will find that it is bigger than just a single event. And when a culture is sustainable, it does transform security from a one-time event into a life cycle that generates consistent returns for the individuals as well as for the organization. Some of you might think, well, do we have a culture? Why do we need a culture? But I think the primary answer is something that deep down we all know. In any system, humans are unfortunately the weakest link, and that's just the reality of it. So the security culture is primarily for the humans and not the computers. The computers do what we tell them to do, and long may that continue. But the humans do need a framework to understand what the right thing is to do for security and in general, and humans within an organization do want to do the right thing. They just need to be taught. So some of the defining features of a security culture, and again, I'll rattle through these pretty quickly. They are self-explanatory. Firstly, it must be an all-in mentality. There's a lot of organizations out there that have the opinion that security and IT is really the responsibility, for the IT department or for the security department. But a sustainable culture requires that everybody in the organization is all in, and everybody must feel like a security person. And I think a simple way to achieve this all-in mentality is to incorporate security at the highest levels into your mission as a company. So updating your organizational objectives to clearly articulate that security is really non-negotiable. Secondly, it's deliberate and it is disruptive. So the primary goal of security is to foster change and obviously better security and protection for everybody. So it must be disruptive and it must be deliberate with a set of actions to foster that particular change. Thirdly, engagement and making it fun. People ideally want to participate in a security culture that is enjoyable and that is a challenge. I think far too long there's been an association with security being quite boring, or somebody saying no all the time. And I do think to cement a sustainable culture, you need to build fun and engagement into the process of all the parts. One of the recent examples that I came across was an organization who started creating phishing writing workshops. Sounds like a bit of a crazy concept, but it involves employees coming together to write a phishing campaign for the company, push it out via simulation, and the person with the most catches ultimately kind of wins a prize. So it doesn't all have to be boring. Fourthly, it needs to be rewarding. So for people to invest their time, they need to understand what they're going to get in return. And I think looking for opportunities to celebrate success is absolutely key in this point. So when someone goes through their mandatory security training and completes it successfully, maybe reward them. A simple cash reward potentially, if that's something which the company is open to doing. £50 voucher, £100 voucher. It's a huge motivator for people, and I think they will definitely remember the security lesson that has provided them with that money. And lastly, it must provide a return on investment. I think the reason why anyone does security is to improve an offering and obviously lower vulnerabilities and protect the business. But we must return a multiple of the effort invested. I'd like to think, as I mentioned earlier on, that most organizations do have a security culture of sorts. If they say they don't, I think they're either in denial or potentially afraid to admit that they might have a bad security culture. But the good news is that any security culture can positively change how the organization approaches security. But culture change does take time. So yeah, very interesting topic, very emotive as well. But I think the key message there is get people involved. The more people involved, the better. I'd like to hand over back to Javad, who can tell us a bit more around building a security awareness training program.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. And so, there's far more to building a security awareness program than I can go through here. I mean, I think this is like at least 3 hours in its own right, but I'll give you the cliff notes as to what it is. The first thing I'd like to start with is that there's 3 realities of security awareness. And they are, just because I'm aware, it doesn't mean that I care. And this is one of those things. It's like you could be driving along the road and you see a sign that says 30 miles per hour. And now you're aware. Does it mean that you care? And, I'm not going to pass judgment on anyone or myself, but, sometimes we do care and other times we just take it as a suggestion. If you try to work against human nature, you will fail. And this is something that, we see all the time. And yet, say for the parents out there, if you try to force your child to do something, you might be able to bully them into doing it, but it's not going to be a habit that will last. You have to try and find ways that appeal to their nature. And number three is what your employees do is way, way more important than what they know. So, you know, when I get into the car, and growing up in the 80s, there was this clunk clink on every trip. It was like to put your seatbelt on. And, you know, that was a big campaign. So I get into the car and I put my seatbelt on. My wife puts her seatbelt on, and our kids put their seatbelt on. Now, they don't know why they put their seatbelt on. They haven't seen all the adverts. They haven't seen the crash test dummies or, you know, heads exploding, but they just know that that's something they have to do. So what they do is way more important than them knowing. And sometimes this is where security awareness programs go wrong. They spend a lot of time trying to explain the intricacies of why they're doing something. Let's just make it easy and fun and engaging for someone to do something. And that's our mission, you know, mission complete. From our end, in an organization, when you're designing a security awareness program, you can't boil the ocean. You can't change everything overnight. A culture doesn't change overnight, but, you know, be specific. So try to identify specific behaviors that you want to change, like what will have the most benefit, you know, and break down, is it a group of behaviors or is it a single behavior? And most importantly, is it a behavior that you have the appetite to take on right now? So, you know, if you've got lots of people working remotely now and there's been lots of disruption, is now the right time to implement something else to make their lives more miserable? Or is it something you want to wait for 6 months until things are kind of like more stable or something like that? So you know, it is very important before rolling out a program to bear these things in mind. Nudges or behavioral nudges are really, really vital. They work really well. And, you know, the example is like something like recycling. You go to throw away your rubbish and there's 3 bins in front of you, and one says like mixed, and one says, you know, cardboard only, and one for your cans or what have you. That's an example of a nudge. It's something that it's simple, it's architected in a way that you're already there. It's not like, hey, put your cardboard here and then walk to the other end of the corridor to put in your cans. No, they're all there. So no one's forcing you to, you know, split out your rubbish, but it's designed in a way that makes it very easy. And I think if we adopt some of those in how we design security and push it out to our users, then it will make it easy. So a good example of a nudge is like password meters. You know, if your password's short, it just shows that the bar doesn't fill up, it's weak, or there's a sad face, and when it's strong, it fills up all the way. Now, technically, you might not be forcing people to use a strong password, but psychologically, people are like, hey, I want all those green lights lit up. I don't want to walk away with this computer telling me that I'm weak or my choices are weak. So that's a good way. And the more of those things we can build into processes, the better. This is one of my favorite things, and this sums up a lot of what we do in Know Before in terms of the campaigns that we run. And you know, if you book a demo, you'll be able to see how easy it is. You can just plan out your entire year's worth of content and let it run on autopilot in many cases. But along the top, you have your regular monthly phishing or quarterly phishing, whatever schedule you set to go out to all your users, and it's randomized, and different templates go to different people at different times. So it's not like someone says, hey, I got this email, and they tell everyone. So that's an ongoing thing that's happening in the background. And then you have all your different channels that come down. And this is how a marketer thinks of a campaign. And this is how we should be thinking about security awareness campaigns, because you're trying to raise awareness and you're trying to get them to change behaviors, exactly how a marketer does. So you have your executives and department managers. They're giving, like, you know, every month they're giving a talk. There's some learning modules that you roll out. There's stuff that reinforced in your newsletter, maybe put on your intranet page. Maybe you have a rotating message on screensavers, some signage going up by the coffee machines. So all of this comes together, and every message reinforces the one above it. So it creates a very, very powerful sort of learning model, because people need to see the same message repeated several times before it gets embedded. And that's pretty much what KnowBe4 our security awareness platform is built on. It's, you baseline it, you train your users, you provide that phishing again, you see the results, and you can measure, you can see, like Carl was saying about measuring the return on investment is key. I threw this in there because I thought this is a great example of designing something for behavior. And this is based on BJ Fogg's behavior model. And it's got three components to a behavior. There's motivation, ability, and prompt. So you can see, like, if you want someone to drink a glass of water, what is the motivation for that? And then what is their ability to do that? And then what prompts can you do? And it's if you think about it, these are the kind of things that have made, like, fitness trackers so popular, because, hey, I want to hit that target of 10,000 steps a day, and then my watch will buzz at me every hour if I don't get up and walk around and what have you. So these kinds of things, no one's forcing me to, but just through shared design and a few prompts and nudges, you can design something that changes someone's behavior. And now I'm a lot more fitter than I was before. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. And finally, something that we're really proud of. So we have one of the biggest libraries of content in the market. There's over, like, 1,200 bits of content in our library, way more than you'll ever get through. And a lot of it is some of the traditional security awareness that you might have seen. There's posters, there's graphics, there's some games in there, but we also do these live action series, and one of them is called The Inside Man, which is just like a Netflix style show with, like, short episodes and multiple seasons with the same cast, and it's more of a drama. There's another one called Restricted Intelligence, which is same, but it's more of a comedy. And these things are actually binge worthy. We have people, they sit there, and they're not security people, they're not technology people, but they want to watch every episode, and they normally get together in a conference room, and they'll get pizza in, and they'll watch it all in one go because they're so interested in the characters. But it's an engaging format through which you can deliver serious security messages in a medium that doesn't feel like it's hard work. And I think that really does play to a lot of the reasons that our content is so successful, and hopefully helps educate and inform your employees. With that, I think we can wrap up and head to any questions that we might have.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Javad. That was very interesting, and yeah, it very much is all about engagement. So we've had quite a few questions come in. Javad, I think this one is for you. I'm not sure if you can see it in the chat, but I'll read it for you if you can't see it. So, with regard to ongoing training for staff and the positive difference this has for their knowledge, can you please provide some examples of what type of training and how often this was done to make a difference?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question, and this is something that when you onboard, then a customer service manager can take into account the size of your organization and your specific needs, and help you tailor something that's appropriate for your organization. But roughly, like, the general recommendation is fish your users at least once a month, and then build a campaign of what content you want from the library to go out. I mean, smaller training more frequently is far better than trying to do something once a year. The analogy that is often used is, like, would you rather run just one marathon once a year, or run 1 mile a day for the whole year? And the second provides greater health benefits, I suppose. That's where I'm going with that analogy. But yeah, we help you with going through that whole process of finding the right content and building out a program that's specific for your organization.
Great. Another question's come in. What can we do in the meantime whilst we plan to schedule our security awareness training program? I think from my side of things, and sometimes being on the front line when you are involved in security issues, basic security hygiene, I think, absolutely key. raising the profile of cybersecurity across the organization. So speaking about cybersecurity in your leadership meetings, in your management meetings, or your department meetings, you know, passwords. I mean, passwords are such a big thing, and I still can't believe we're banging the drum about passwords. But yeah, really, you know, try and drive password complexity, and get your IT organizations to look at, you know, enforcing complex passwords which need to be changed quite regularly. And then obviously, yeah, you know, kind of get on board with your security awareness training. It doesn't take long to set up. Another question which is quite relevant, Javad, this is probably for you. In terms of, can you tell us more about the phishing simulators and what that looks like?
So the phishing simulators, they basically they come with like thousands of pre-made templates for you. You know, you can say something like, you know, we want it to appear like it's a LinkedIn message coming to you, and then you can tailor it to be more specific, or you can create your templates yourself. So if you have your own HR system that sends out periodic notifications, you can create something like that. There's lots of guidelines available in how to create it, and also, you know, we need to remember and understand the objective is to educate people. It's not necessarily to catch them out. So you can create something that's completely, like, you know, you're guaranteed someone's going to fall for it, but you don't want to be in that position where you create something that is too personal for people, or you know, pulls on a negative emotion that makes them get angry. So there's a lot of guidance there. The templates, I mean, there's thousands of templates there, so there should be something that is suitable for your needs.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot, Javad, and thank you all for your questions. We are unfortunately out of time. We're just going to 46 minutes. But you know, I would encourage you guys, if you want to look at booking a demo. You know, the KnowBe4 demos are really impactful. They're really effective, very easy to set up. So so please, if you want to get in touch, just, you know, drop myself an email. My details are on the screen. Or if you're one of our clients that's on the webinar, just get in touch with your account manager, and we'll be very happy to set up a demo. But I'd like to thank you all for your time. I know everyone's really busy. I hope you found it informative and interesting, more to the point. Javad, thank you very much. It's been good chatting with you on the topic. Yeah, we will hopefully be in contact with you guys soon.
Thank you very much.